Okay, so we are now, if you have the books, it's on page 16. We're now starting this week in the Jewish world. We are beginning the 5th book of the Torah. Starting it on the Shabbos, we will end it on Simchas Torah. We're that close to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, to the holiday season. My stomach just clenched. So the 5th book of the Torah is set in a different tone than the first 4 books of the Torah. The first 4 books of the Torah are, I guess, what we would call the come, Jeff. This is what you get. This is your reward. The first 4 books of the Torah are written from a narrator's perspective. It's God spoke to Moses, Moses spoke to God, Aaron spoke to Moses. All of that, it's from a narrator. The 4th book of the Torah winds to a close that we read yesterday with nearing Moses' passing. We don't get into the passing, but clearly Aaron has passed on. Miriam has passed on, Aaron's brother and sister, and Moses' brother and sister. And then God says things you have to do before you need to get done before you pass on. And he's preparing the Jews to go off into Israel because he knows he's going to pass away in the desert. That's how we ended yesterday in synagogue. The 5th book of the Torah is roughly the last 5 weeks. It's 37 days. So of Moses' life. It opens up, the Torah tells us the date, the first day of the month of Shvat. Moses passes away on the 7th of Adar, the next one, a month and 7 days. And it's all Moses speaking to the Jews in these 5 weeks. And the context is not the narrator. It's Moses saying, I said to God, God said to me, I said to Aaron, Aaron said to me. It's Moses speaking in first person. And there's the thrust of the book. There are a lot of mitzvahs in there, but the thrust of the book, the context of the book, is Moses is talking to the Jews when he knows he's going to die soon. He's talking to them in a more raw way often. And he's also recapping for them what they experienced in Egypt, what they experienced at Sinai, because he wants to concretize, and he says it. He wants to emblazon the memories on their minds so they can adequately pass it on to the next generations. This is a very important link between their time together in the desert and going forward in Israel's trying to funnel those memories into them and to inspire them to take them forward into the land of Israel. So, sometimes there are some more blunt words of rebuke. There's a lot of, this is what we went through together in his recap. And this is how, and it begins with, and I'm just going to read the overview, which is on page 16, and I'll bring up the shared screen. Well, okay. Parsha overview. Okay. On the first day of Shvat, 37 days before its passing, Moses begins his repetition of the Torah. You can call it repetition of the Torah. It's not actually a repetition of the Torah. It's really recapping what they went through in the desert. And when you think of Torah, you think like back to Abraham and Sarah. He doesn't go into that. It's about their experience together. To the assembled children of Israel, reviewing the events that occurred and the laws that were given in the course of their 40-year journey from Egypt to Mount Sinai, to the Promised Land. Rebuking the people for their failings and iniquities, and enjoining them to keep the Torah and observe its commandments in the land that God is giving them as an eternal heritage, into which they shall cross after Moses' death. Moses recalls his appointment of judges and magistrates to ease his burden of meting out justice to the people. And I'm going to explain that. He recalls a lot of stuff. The judges and the magistrates, remember, there were a couple million people. Now he has a Torah, which is a structure for life. And judges and magistrates, I want to just call that into mind. We think of judges and magistrates as a judicial system. In Torah thinking, from the time of Moses, what we would translate as judges were people who were really kind of a blend of a legislature and a judicial system. When you had to figure out, like, what do we do with Pesach when it falls out on Friday, or what do we need? Who'd you go to? To the judges. It wasn't about litigants. It was about interpreting Torah. So in the English word judge, we think of someone in black robes and a gavel. Judges were rabbis who were interpreting Torah. They were interpreting Torah when two people were arguing over if the fence is on the property line, and they were interpreting Torah if someone came to say, what do I do if I'm going to be traveling to Alaska over Pesach, and how do I give me guidance, because I don't know, it's not textbook. So when Moses brought us the Torah, he had to set up a system, a tiered system. There's no internet. There's no ability for public address systems. So they had to create a tiered system of how the teachings would go. And God tells him to do that, because he was trying to do it all himself. And God says, this ain't going to work. You have to have a tiered system. So what it says here is Moses recalls his appointment of judges and magistrates to ease his burden of meting out justice to the people and teaching them the word of God. The journey from Mount Sinai through the great and fearsome desert, the sending of the spies, and the people subsequent spurning the promised land. It really should have taken just a couple of weeks for them to get to Israel, but they were not allowed in because of some tragic events. One of them about the spies who rejected the land of Israel and caused the Jews to reject it. So God decreed that the entire generation of the Exodus would die out in the desert. Also against me, says Moses, was God angry for your sake, saying, you too shall not go in there. So he said, I suffered because of you. I'm dying here in the desert. I don't get to see what we've been looking for. When God spoke to Moses, telling him back when the Jews were slaves in Egypt, and Moses was a shepherd out there with his sheep, God spoke to him from a burning bush. And at that burning bush, God said to him, go take the Jews out of Egypt, and you'll bring them to this mountain, which happened to be Mount Sinai, and you will take them to the land of your ancestors. So Israel was always the goal, the objective. Moses also recounts some more recent events: the refusal of the nations of Moab and Ammon to allow the Israelites to pass through their countries, the wars against the Amorite kings at Sichon and Og, and the settlement of the lands by the tribes of Reuben and Gad, part of the tribe of Manasseh. And Moses' message to his successor, Joshua, who will succeed him in taking the land and leading them in the battles for its conquest. Fear them not in these battles, for the Lord your God, he shall fight for you. So that's a nice encapsulation of the Torah portion. Today, we're going to be talking about Israel. Talk about our connection with Israel. When I say our connection, I say us as Jews, not as Israelis. We're Jews. Maybe some of you have never been to Israel. In Torah thinking, every Jew has a part in Israel. And hopefully in the Jewish psyche, even a Jew who has never been to Israel feels that that's their land. I think it's getting a little bit watered down these past couple of decades, but generally that has been the Jewish psyche. We always, in our prayers 3 times a day, we're talking about Israel. We talk about our land and as our land, and a hopeful return and rebuilding of the Jewish Commonwealth, which hasn't existed for a couple thousand years. Okay. So now I want to get to, actually, here's a question they put in here. Why are Jews so connected to and invest in the land of Israel, even if they live thousands of miles away and possibly have never been there for generations? We feel connected to the land. The Jews were given the land. Usually there's a connection with the land. There's a history there. There's a culture, and the land has to have certain borders. It's what is the land and what's not the land, and there's a language. The Jews, these Jews, really, none of them had ever lived in Israel. The Jews are in the desert. Their ancestors hundreds of years before had been there. they went on. They did have the culture, and they're kind of an expanded culture. They did have the language, but they didn't have at least a memory of the land, just what hundreds of years before them had told them. So let's start with text 1. See what Moses says to them. This is the very beginning of the 5th book of the Torah, the beginning of this week's Torah portion. These are the words that Moses spoke to all Israel on that side of the Jordan in the desert. In other words, not on the Israel side, in the plain opposite the Sea of Reeds, between Paran and Tophel, Lavan and Chatzeres and Dizahav. It is 11 days' journey from Choreb by way of Mount Seir to Kadesh Barnea. He says to them, listen, Choreb means Mount Sinai. We came out 7 weeks after coming out of Egypt. We were at Mount Sinai. We got the Torah. From there, we're supposed to go to Israel. It's 11 days. It should take us to get to this spot where we're able to cross over. Took us 40 years. Took us 40 years because we messed up. But even that, we spent a lot of time. We spent a year and a half, roughly, at Mount Sinai. For a year and a half, and the Torah does talk about that time, they were in view of Mount Sinai. They hadn't started moving at all. But we'll get back to it in a second. It came to pass in the 40th year, in the 11th month, the first of the month, that Moses spoke to the children of Israel according to all that the Lord had commanded him regarding them. So now, 40th, in the 40th year, now he's starting to talk to them. After he had smitten Sichon, the king of the Amorites, who dwelt in Cheshbon, Og, king of the Bashan, who dwelt in Ashterus in Edrei, on that side of the Jordan, the land of Moab, which is today Jordan, Moses commenced and complained and explained this law, saying, God spoke to us in Choreb, saying, you have dwelt long enough at this mountain. We stayed there for a year and a half. Long enough, the long enough is a nice translation, but it actually means like we've overstayed. It's time to move on. Turn and journey, come to the mountain of the Amorites and all its neighboring places, in the plain, on the mountain, in the lowland, and in the south, and by the seashore, the land of the Canaanites and the Lebanon, until the great river, the great Euphrates River. See, I have set the land before you. Come and possess the land that God swore to your forefathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give to them and the descendants after them. So we stayed very long there by the mountain, and there's a reason that we're dwelling on that now. And then God said, enough. Now, what does it mean, enough? Which means you have dwelt a lot here. The primary commentary in the Torah, Rashi, in text 2, page 19, he says, they don't have the whole thing here. He says it means literally, spent a long time. Now, why did they spend a long time? They came down from Sinai. Moses came down with the tablets. The Jews were hanging out with the golden calf. Broke the tablets. It took them up until Yom Kippur, from June, to get the second tablets. It took time. The day after Yom Kippur, that first Yom Kippur, God tells them, build a tabernacle. What's a tabernacle? We have to put things together. They don't open the tabernacle until just before the first anniversary of them leaving Egypt. In the middle, part of this also, they're waiting as they're building the tabernacle. They're teaching that Moses is teaching the Torah. They're building the tabernacle and teaching the Torah. So they had a lot of work to do. They accomplished a lot there. So Rashi says, when he's saying you have dwelt, it says dwelt long enough, it means like you've dwelt a lot there. It means a lot in time, but it means what Rashi says, the language of the Torah means to insinuate, God has given you much greatness and reward for having dwelt at this mountain. You accomplished a lot during this year and a half you hung out at Mount Sinai. And he lists off a few things. You made a tabernacle, a menorah on the other sacred vessels of the temple. He pulls out menorah, but there's the tabernacle and all the vessels of the temple, of which menorah is one. You received the Torah. You appointed courts and hierarchies of leaders. In other words, that's what you accomplished in hanging out there. So here, what's saying the Rebbe, it's an odd comment of Rashi for several reasons. I won't get into analyzing the Rashi too much, but just at what he pulls out, saying what they accomplished there. The Rebbe is saying, it advances an opinion that this Rashi is trying to explain how God was preparing us in that time at Sinai for to create our national identity. Our national identity is connected with Israel, but it's not about Israel per se. It's not about a piece of land. It's about a spiritual identity. So let's go to text 3. We find the Torah early on, before it's talking about the Jews. It talks about nationality. What does it say? It says, from these, the islands of the nations, how do we have nations separated? They have land, they have borders. They each one to their language. They have their own language. And according to the families and the nations, they have their culture. So in a way, what the Torah is saying is that the borders and the language and the culture helps create distinctions between nations. And I think we see that in our regular life. With the Jews, all of that is true because we're human beings, but there's something more. When God tells us that he wants us to be a people, because we were just a ragtag band of Hebrews until Sinai. At Sinai, God says to us, you shall be to me a kingdom of princes and a holy nation. It says your identity is, holy nation we understand. We have to be holy. He says, I want you to be a holy people. The word that they translate here as princes, it's a totally legit translation, but the Hebrew word is Kohens, which means a priest. So because we're not all Kohens, we explain means of, nobles or princes, but he uses a language of holiness. Who were the Kohens? The Kohens were servants in the temple of holiness. So when God tells us we are to be a people, he doesn't say you're going to be a people because you have land. You're not going to say you're not people because you share a language or because you share a culture, which is all true. First and foremost, you are holy, whatever holy means. That's the definition God gives us. Now, what does being holy, how do I become holy? So first of all, we say the Torah itself says, God says, you should be holy. How do you get holy? I am holy. Connect with me wherever there's space in our lives for God. That we're allowing holiness into our life. The definition of holiness is something that is surrendered to God. You eat breakfast, it's eggs over easy and toast and orange juice. If the perspective is this is a meal done in the way God wants it to be done, and I'm remembering that, I even make a blessing, and then I dig in, there's holiness in that meal. Wherever we allow God in. So God says, you be holy, because I'm holy. You plug into me. I'm the source of holiness. As much as you plug into me, you're holy.
So, okay, so then are we not innately holy because God created us?
Absolutely.
Or do we have to plug, or do we have to plug?
It's an excellent question, Rhonda. There's an innate holiness in us, which is there, but it isn't necessarily conscious or activated. We need to activate our own holiness. We absolutely, because God said, I want this person to exist, there's a kernel of holiness. That person goes and robs, rapes, and pillages, that's not holy. Does that person still have holiness? Yes. Subconscious, hidden, buried. But if created by God, there's got to be some sense of holiness. Our job is to try and bring it into our conscious life, and not just say, "Listen, I'm born." When a child is out there, an adult child, and they have their DNA, their connection, right? They're connected to the family. They could say, "Do I have to call on anniversaries and birthdays? I'm still family. I'm always family." Or do you want to bring that family consciousness into life and say, no, thank you. Now you act like your family. You remember that you're family. You make space for family. Or just say, you always say, well, it's in my DNA. Yes, holiness is in our DNA, but it's not good enough. We have to bring it into life. I'm glad you brought that up. Okay. So text 6. To take this a little further, the Medrash tells us on this holiness theme. It's God says, you shall be holy. God gives us this abstract mitzvah. We got to be holy. Come home today. God told us we have to be holy. What do I do with that? Tell me, I got to eat this much matzah. I know what I'm doing. Got to put that on my doorpost. I know what I'm doing. How do I become holy? Connect to God. Why? For I've attached, in the language of the Talmud, God tells us, I've attached you to my hip. God says to us, you're attached to me. And now it's up to you to recognize it. As the verse states in Jeremiah, as the belt is attached to the hip of man, you're attached to me. That's what God says in Jeremiah. Therefore, you shall be holy, for I God am holy. In other words, God told the Jewish people, in the words of the Medrash, I am not like a human king. An ordinary person is not allowed to carry the king's name. So to me, I want you to carry my name. By contrast, God is called holy, as the verse states, holy, 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 the Lord of hosts. It's in Isaiah, it's in our prayers, for the Lord of hosts is holy. And we, Jewish people, are also called holy, as the verse states, you shall be holy. So this is something where we're kids, and we're family, and we have a mission to connect with that holiness. In the land of Israel, Hebrew, all that stuff. But first, it's like the primary focus is being holy. So now let's get back to how the Jews are at Sinai, and God says, "You got your Torah. Now I want you to be holy." So step 1, the day after Moses comes down with the second tablets, well, God says step 1 is create a tabernacle. What is that? Text 7. This is from the Rebbe. The main component of a holy nation is, as the verse states, you should be holy, for I God am holy. A nation must be holy because God, who is holy, is present in their midst. The Jewish nation made a mishkan, a tabernacle, literally a dwelling place, so there would be a fixed location for God's holy presence. So we don't have a tabernacle today. We have synagogues. Why do you need a synagogue? In Jewish law, do you really need a synagogue? You don't need a synagogue. A mikveh, you need to pray, you need to study, you need to put up mezuzah, you need a house. There's no mitzvah thou shalt make a synagogue. What have we done though? Because we don't have a temple. We say if it's important to us, we want to dedicate a space and say this is a place of communing with God. Of course, God's God. And we want to always connect with God, whether we're in our car or at home. But creating a space, it makes it special. If there's, I guess again, I would go back to family. Some houses you have a mother-daughter space, that what they call. You can just give them a bedroom in the house, but giving them their own space is dedicating. There's a psychological fixing of the idea that this is important to me, and I'm creating space for it. An office in your house, whatever example you'd like to use. The tabernacle, we were dedicating a space for our communion with God. In the tabernacle, it was miraculous. So you walked into the tabernacle. No one walking into the tabernacle or the temple ever questioned whether there's God. All the conversations we have here, it would be totally boring because no one would be fighting the God idea because it's God. You walked in there, you felt it, you knew it, and without that, we don't know it. So, but the first thing of that God told him is, I don't want you to just stand there at Sinai. You had this incredible, wonderful experience, and you heard, you spoke to me, you had the spiritual fireworks, but now I want you to anchor that in real life. And we want to know that God is in your midst, and to recognize that you can anchor God in your life. Your home can be a tabernacle to a certain extent. So point number 1 was God saying, I want you to not only have had a holy experience at Sinai, I want you to bring holiness into your life. The next one, what they put here, it's on the bottom of 22, what they put as step 2, I'm going to insert something else here because they don't mention here about the menorah. Remember, Rashi, primary commentary, mentioned about that God gave them the menorah. The menorah, in the words of the Talmud, the light of the menorah is a testament to the world that God rests within the Jewish people. To us, a menorah is Hanukkah and all that, but in the times, there was a menorah before Hanukkah. And the menorah was in the temple, was the light represented godliness, and that there's a representation of God in our lives. And this idea of not only feeling it, but being proud of it and expressing it to the world, that the world can see that we are a godly people, that's what the menorah is. Then we go to text 8, which will be step 3. During that time at Sinai, where they're building a tabernacle, including a menorah. As we said, God was giving them, Moses was teaching them how to implement the commandments. Look. Yeah, thank you. Actually, I did it right. So text 8, so that you shall remember and perform all my commandments and shall be holy to your God. The point is, if you look, mitzvahs and holiness go together. Whenever we do a mitzvah, Hanukkah, washing your hands, Kiddush, whatever, there's a language, a formula we use. We say, Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvotav. Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvotav means, we say, Baruch atah Hashem, thank you God, blessed are you God, Master of the universe. Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvotav means, for you have made us holy through your commandments. That's what it is. That, think about it for a second. A person, someone, there's a special relationship. And so someone special to you says, I'd really like that. A cup of water, an aspirin, whatever. And you go and you do something for the person. What you've done is you have made space in your life, said, whatever I wanted to do right now, my special friend, my loved one wants something, I'm going to be doing it. And going and doing it, going and implementing and following the instruction or the wish of someone is a connection. It could be a romantic connection, at least it's an emotional connection. You have made space. When God gives us mitzvahs, God is saying, I'd like a cup of water. I'd like this to get done. And us doing it is opening space in our lives and saying it's a trigger to bring God into our lives. And God feels as good or better as the loved one who says, well, I needed it and they went and got me an aspirin. Or they went to go, whatever, take out the garbage, whatever it is. Doing for another. So mitzvahs are all lightning rods for connection with God. They're all handles, anchors for bringing God into our lives. Because it's not just some passive or dry to-do list. It's God saying, please put up a mezuzah. Please light a Shabbos candle. And then we go do it. Oh my gosh. That's Kiddush on mitzvah. You've made us holy because now you gave us an opportunity. You told us what we do. How am I supposed to know what God wants? Could I ever figure out what an infinite being wants? God says, I want a mezuzah. I'll do it. And by doing it, I've created space for God in my life. And that's called holiness connection. And that's why it's the formula every time we make a bracha. Maybe we do a mitzvah, we make a blessing.
I have another question.
Go for it.
All right, so having a tabernacle is like a physical place. It seems like there's, for the people to understand the connection, they need a physical place, or they have an object, which is a menorah. But doing mitzvot is an action.
Yeah.
The other ones are like physical representations of holiness.
Okay, and but the doing mitzvahs in a way is even deeper because you're actually doing something for someone, and therefore it's more building up the connection. When you do something for someone, you're getting a gift and you're giving them a gift of relationship. That could be in building a space too, but you're right, that's more context. And the menorah is more an announcement of it. But then the person matters, the person asked, I had something to do right now, but I'm gonna figure out what to do because you matter. That's really a core of mattering to someone and making space for someone. And then that's really a core of holiness for individually. The tabernacle out there, it's great. So you and I, we can go visit it, we see it, but it's kind of a little bit, I guess that's what you're saying, it's got a little bit detached from us because it's over there. And if we go visit it, we'll go visit it. But Shabbos candles in my house and your house. We get to bring that holiness into our lives through our actions, and that's much more tangible. I guess that's your point.
Yeah.
Agreed.
That's part of the Shema.
That's part of the Shema, yes, and that's part of one of the reasons it's part of the Shema, because it's just so central. That this is doing mitzvahs makes us holy, gives us an opportunity for holiness. Every time we have a mitzvah, it's an opportunity for holiness, and we thank God for the opportunity. Along these lines, from the 13th century great Rabbi Bachya says, this is on page 23, a popular idea teaches that the holiness of the Jewish nation hinges upon the mitzvahs. This is the meaning of the statement of the Sifrei, which is a medrash of the rabbis, on the verse, you shall be holy. What is you shall be holy? How, that's such an abstract mitzvah. What it means is do mitzvahs. This refers to the holiness of mitzvahs. The commandments are the primary source of our holiness. And it is for this reason that our sages institute the blessing, who has sanctified us with his commandments, commanded us to perform a given mitzvah. That's the formula. Always that formula. Asher kedeshanu soisav. That you sanctified us, you made us holy with your commandments. It is because of the mitzvahs that the Jewish nation was branded a holy nation of Mount Sinai. The reason that God said you're a kingdom of not of priests, but we didn't translate it as priests, but of princes and a kingdom of princes and a holy nation, that we're holy, is because at Sinai, God just said, I'm sprinkling holy water on you, now you're holy? No, I'm giving you mitzvahs, the opportunity for holiness. As the verse states, you shall be a kingdom of princes and a holy nation. That's right there. Okay. Now, in this sense, this goes back to what we said before, that Rashi said that at that time, standing hanging out at Mount Sinai for a year and a half, we had the Sinai experience. We built the Mishkan. We built, and we had the menorah, and then we got mitzvahs. And that's what the language he said is that the judicial system was created. As I said before, the judicial system is really a legislative system too. And let's look at Maimonides about this. The members of the Supreme Sanhedrin in Jerusalem, which was 71 sages, are the primary arbiters of the oral law. They are the pillars of instruction from whom statutes and judgments issued forth for the entire Jewish people. Concerning them, the Torah states, you shall do according to the laws that they shall instruct you. This is a positive commandment. The reason that Jewish law, Jewish society, Judaism became a bit fractured was because of the Romans stopping the functioning of the Sanhedrin. The reason that Sephardim eat rice on Passover and Ashkenazim don't eat rice on Passover is because there's no Sanhedrin to say yay or nay. So they've got their rabbis, we've got our rabbis, we love each other, but there are going to be different traditions. This splintering into different traditions began when the Sanhedrin, the great court, began to be impeded and was forbidden to function because they were the voice of authority. So again, it wasn't so much the Sanhedrin, it's about judging between two litigants. It was explaining and deciding nuances of law. If a doubt arose in a Jew's mind over any law, he or she would acquire the court of the city. If the court knew, they would answer. If not, the questioner and the court or its agents ascended to Jerusalem and asked the court that held sessions on the Temple Mount. If they knew, they would answer. If they did not know, everyone would come to the court that held sessions at the entrance to the Temple courtyard. There was a whole system. You'd start off and work your way up. If they knew, they would answer. If they did not know, everyone would come to the chamber of hewn stone, which was in the temple, to the Supreme Sanhedrin of 71, and present the question. If the matter was unresolved by all the others, was known to the Supreme Sanhedrin, either as part of the oral tradition or because of its derivation to the principles of exegesis that would use their brilliance of extracting law and deciding law, they would relate the decision immediately. If, however, the decision was unclear to the Supreme Sanhedrin, which happened, they would deliberate about the matter at that time and debate it back and forth until they reached a unanimous decision or until a vote was taken and it would go by majority. In such a situation, they followed the majority and then told all the questioners, this is the halacha. And when they came out, when they made a statement that this is the law, nobody disputed it. If they came out and said, rice on Pesach, everybody says rice on Pesach. That was it. We don't have them, so we've got a bunch of different rabbinic opinions. Again, the general rubric, everyone agrees, but the nuances is it's been going on for 2,000 years with different opinions. Okay. So now let's take this. Actually, before we get to that, so what we established here is that God told the Jews at Sinai, you're going to be going to Israel. It's not going to be 11 days, it's going to be 40 years, but you're going to be going to Israel. The launching point, and Israel is the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. The launching point is you have to know you're holy people. And you're going to a land that has an inherent holiness. That's why it's your land. Your holiness is going to connect with the land. It's going to be beautiful. It's not that the land is going to make you holy. You're going to be holy, and you're going to be able to bring out that holiness, to exercise your holiness, to amplify your holiness, because you're in a land that's holy. How do we know that the land was holy intrinsically? A verse in Zechariah, there are a few verses. They picked one. God shall inherit in Judah as his portion. It merely means this. It doesn't mean inherit. We think inherit is the one who gets it. This is his, I think, it is bequeath. Judah as his portion in the Holy Land, and shall choose Jerusalem again. In other words, that we call it the holy ground. It was holy ground. And just another example they pick over here is when Joshua takes the Jews into Israel after Moses passes away. Shortly after Moses passes away, he has an encounter with an angel. And the captain of, it says in text 12 on page 26, the captain of God's host said to Joshua, remove your shoes from your feet, for the place in which you stand, it is holy, and Joshua did so. That's what God told Moses at the burning bush also. It says, take off your shoes, because it's holy ground. And the idea of shoes, the separation between our feet and the ground, is probably a different topic, unless I want to talk about it. And it's connected with why we don't wear leather shoes, because shoes in Torah thinking lexicon are leather. We don't wear shoes on Yom Kippur. With holy ground, it says we don't. In other words, the land itself in Israel is holy. And because it's holy, we recognize we need to be a holy people. We're living in a land that's holy. And as the great Shalom from the 1600s says, one should learn from here that when a person is a holy place, they should adopt holy practices. The holier the place, the more holy practices one should accept, should adopt. So it was up to us at Sinai to recognize and to bring in our own and bring out our intrinsic holiness, to live holy lives, and then move towards going to Israel, which is the Holy Land. And the Medrash tells us that the Jewish people were thinking to enter the land immediately, right after Sinai. And Moses said to them, you thinking to inherit the land? You think, are you ready? Keep the way of the holy and blessed is he. As it is stated, look to God and keep to his way, and he'll raise you high that you may inherit the land, and that when the wicked are cut off, you shall see it. The holy and blessed he says that let the people of Israel who have come to be my portion inherit the land that has come to be my portion. The Medrash is saying that part of the reason that the Jews didn't get Israel right away is because they didn't have that level of holy connection where they would be in sync with the land. And this was really an important element of what Moses was telling the Jews as he passed away, saying, you're about to go in, you've got to exercise your holiness. Yeah.
Back to text 11,
Sure.
because I'm a little confused.
Go ahead.
What does that mean?
Yeah. We believe that there is, to us, ground is kind of just ground. You stand on it or you sit on it, and what you do is either holy or unholy. The way the Torah presents it is there is such a thing as ground that is inherently holy. Either because of what was done there, or because of the fact that God decreed it as holy. And there are things, let's say a synagogue, any synagogue, there are some things you're not allowed to do in there because it's considered a holy environment. We actually specifically, we have our ark with doors, and then we have another set of doors outside it, which halachically creates it as a separate space, and therefore we can have a Purim party there. Be a little funky, but the Torahs are there, but the Torahs are behind two doors. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do it that way, or just hold whatever we're doing, even a dinner, which is wonderful, but it's not a whole. It's not in the sync with the synagogue. There's a holy environment, as I say. When God met Moses, he's out to bring his flock to pasture. God says, "You don't realize you're on holy ground." And Israel is considered holy ground. That there had been a tradition for a couple of thousand years, which is still done if you stand in Ben Gurion Airport, you'll see people coming off, and some of them, when they land, they come out of the terminal and they will go and kiss the ground. They'll kiss the ground because it's holy land. Not everybody does it. Not my deal, but it's an understandable thing. So that's where this is saying. So we exercise our holiness, and we're being brought to a land that is holy. And as the Rebbe would say in text 15, when one doesn't accept Jewish proofs that the land of Israel is the Holy Land, so people say, why? Well, this is a Jewish Meshigas. What do you mean Holy Land? Tell them to travel around the world and ask any of the nations of the world what this land is called. And they'll discover that every nation refers to it in their language as a holy land, whether it's English, Russian, etc., etc. So it's known as a holy land, different religions, different ways. Interestingly enough, it struck me this morning because I was looking at this. The Rebbe, one of the things that the Rebbe would consistently encourage Jews and Israel to do was to not be ashamed of being a holy people and not be ashamed of it being a holy land. He says the world, Jonathan Sacks, blessed memory, Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Sacks, he phrased it as non-Jews respect Jews who respect their religion. That was Jonathan Sacks. I think he had a very good point. That when non-Jews see Jews dismissive of their own religion, it doesn't make them accept you. It makes them disrespect you. Like, just be proud of who you are. His line was, non-Jews respect Jews who respect their religion. The Rebbe didn't use those words. The Rebbe would say, you being afraid in the UN, or because when you're talking to people who aren't Jewish, being afraid to say it's our land and it's a holy land and we want to live holy lives, said what you're doing is you're demeaning yourself, because say it, mean it, and then they'll accept it. So one thing that struck me this morning, I was thinking, the Rebbe was not happy that Israel took part in the Olympics. And as a teenager, I was thinking, I mean, I wouldn't question the Rebbe. I was thinking, how can you not take part in the Olympics? Everybody's doing the Olympics. I want Israel to win the gold. The Rebbe wasn't saying we shouldn't partake in global sports. He said the Olympics has pagan roots. That's not us. So you say, so you're going to send two people to beat each other to do a non-Jewish sport like boxing in an Olympics. So have some pride. We're Jews. We have a way of life. We have some principles. We're not going to do this. When I was 15, it didn't really. It's okay, whatever. I was thinking. I didn't. Now it makes more sense to me actually. See, they just stake out a turf. This is who we are. We can't do this. We're not campaigning against it, but this is not our deal. Have some pride in you. Have some pride and say, this is a land that's been ours for thousands of years, and don't be afraid to say it. And don't be afraid to say that I'm a Jew and I need to lead a holy life. It's as I get older, it's making more sense to me. Okay.
They don't participate in the boxing, but swimming is okay.
No, there are two things. There are two things. In the context of the Olympics, he said, why? It said this is the Greeks. He said we have a whole Hanukkah, and we're celebrating that the Greeks didn't win. And then we go play under their banner. So there are other things you can play. You have the Maccabee games. There are other ways to do it. Separately, I don't, something like boxing is probably not, although they're doing pretty well in judo. I don't know how much they hurt each other, but the idea was we should live like Jews, and don't be ashamed. So we don't have to do everything like everybody else does. Text 16. Taking this to security. This is also from the Rebbe. All Jewish people are inheritors of the entire Torah. Okay, we all get the Torah. The Torah includes the verse in this week's Torah portion, your locks are iron and copper, which is a poetic way of saying that Israel has security with God. As such, every single Jew possesses the ability to influence the security of the land of Israel and to create locks of iron and copper for its protection. Even if one is very far away from Israel, they still have the responsibility to care for its security as the land of Israel is the eternal birthright of every Jew. Whether we're living, wherever we're living, whether we've ever been to Israel, Israel's security is our issue. If we're Jews, it matters to us and it's our responsibility. Practically. What can we do? We can picket in the streets. We can donate to AIPAC. There's lots we can do. One thing is we can do mitzvahs. Practically, this means that when any Jew, even a young child, studies Torah and observes mitzvahs, they create iron and copper locks for the entire Jewish nation, being that all Jews are interconnected. In other words, when one studies Torah and performs mitzvahs, they secure the land of Israel with locks of iron and copper against any adversary. And this was, without getting into the into difficult conversations, what was Ben Gurion's original thinking of saying that those who are going to be devoting themselves to Torah study don't have to protect the land through IDF, they'll study. Those who aren't protecting the land, seriously applying themselves to Torah study, should get into the army. But if they're going to be seriously doing that, that was Ben Gurion's idea, which again has been a little abused, but the idea that this is also protection of the land. Okay, key points. After the Jews left Egypt, they did not even attempt to enter Israel before they received the Torah, built a Mishkan, and established courts. Number two, it was important to establish our identity as a holy nation before entering the Holy Land. That's why we had these exercises as we were still at Sinai. Number three, holiness is sensitive. It must be cultivated with care. We can do that through mitzvahs, letting God into our lives. Number four, aside from what we do, the land of Israel itself is inherently holy. Number five, when we act as a holy nation, we demonstrate to the world that the Holy Land is ours. And number six, when we act as a holy nation, we draw blessings for protection to the Holy Land. One second. I missed a question on the chat. Apologize, I didn't notice it. Hello. Okay, a couple of questions. It appears to me that only the Abrahamic cultures consider Israel Holy Land. For example, China and Japan, in my experience, do not. That could be. I don't think that was talking about every single person, but I have no idea what they do in China and Japan. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's correct that they don't. Second. Why did Jews need to fight and conquer the land? In today's day and age, it doesn't play out well. Suggest it belonged to someone else and the Jews took it by force. That's a good question. The Canaanites were there, and they were the very first Rashi in the Torah, which speaks about creation of the world. Very first Rashi in the Torah, God says that the Rashi quotes the Medrash, which says that the reason God started off, the Torah starts off with creation, he says, because one day people will come and tell the Jews, you are thieves, you stole the land of the Canaanites. And therefore, the Torah says, God says, I created the world, I gave lands to people, and then sometimes I took it and I gave it to other people. So the idea that this is something given by God, which is also, if we're talking about what played well, if you have 2 billion Muslims who believe in the Torah, they play with some stuff, but they believe in the Torah, and a billion Catholics, or 1.5 billion Catholics, and a billion Protestants, you got there 3.5 billion people, aside from the Jews, who believe that God gave the land to the Jewish people, if they believe in their scripture. So the idea is, then they say afterwards, Islam will say they afterwards took it away. I don't think they even say that. I once researched it. It's not so clear to me exactly how they say it switched. But the fact is that they certainly recognized the first one. And therefore, it's when they went in, the Jews went in, they didn't go in to fight. They went in to settle it. The inhabitants, the tribes, didn't take over people's towns. They were going to come in to settle the land. When they were fought against, they fought back. But they could have lived in peace together, and that would have been fine Torah-wise.
Thank you, Rabbi. I appreciate the answers. Thank you.
Okay. If there are any other questions, fine. Otherwise, wish you all a great week. See you, God willing, next Sunday.